Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people, where we speak about critical issues in the blindness community and all other issues from across the universe and galaxy. My name is Aaron Richmond. Tonight, we're joined by someone who apparently has been wanting to be on the show for a while. He's a huge fan of the show. It's Marc from Montreal. He joins us. And apart from the fact that Marc is just a really nice guy and just a great guy to talk to, Marc has also been through a lot in his life that he wants to go over. He's learned a lot of lessons, and he thinks that he knows that there's a lot of lessons that people need to learn from around the world and in the blindness community and really all over the place. So, Marc, I'm going to mute my audio. Why don't you just basically dive into your life story, covering everything you want me to know, and don't tell me anything you don't want everybody else to find out about. So there you go.
Okay, Aaron, thanks a lot. Thank you for having me on board on the podcast. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Well, I grew up here in Montreal in the 50s and 60s. I was born in 56, blind from birth due to premature retinopathy. My parents were always there for me. I had an older sister who kind of resented the fact when I came along as a blind person, they had to take a little bit more care to make sure I didn't go down a flight of stairs or stuff like that. And I loved to play with electrical outlets and pull the knobs off of TVs and change the TV channels with the pliers, all kinds of stuff. So I was a brat, I guess, and a little spoiled, I suppose. But my parents gave me all the opportunities that they could. My father had a construction company and later got into harness racing in Florida and in Saratoga, New York, and Foxborough, Massachusetts. But mostly at Blue Bonnets in Montreal, the harness racing industry is now a thing of the past. I believe at Saratoga, they only have the flats and no Blue Bonnets anymore, turning it into housing projects. So that's a change of the times, I guess. So that was my birth and I guess my upbringing. Then I went to school at the Montreal Association School for the Blind, which we'll just call the MAB, which is now the Lethbiridge Layton Mackay Rehabilitation Center and has been taken over by the provincial government and merged organizations. I started there in 1961. I was 5 years old, stayed there all week and came home on the weekend. So all my friends were basically in school and I was friends with neighbors and stuff at home. But I really didn't have friends in the community being away at the school for the blind all week, where it was back then schools for the blind were the mainstream and they were just starting to talk about interfacing blind students into the public system. And it hadn't happened yet. You got to remember, this is 61, 62, and right up to the 70s. And there I learned the most important thing I think that I learned was the use of Braille and how to use Braille with, first of all, a big tack board and then a huge slate, two-line slate, and then you graduated to the slate and stylus. And once you got really proficient with the slate and stylus, then they let you use the Perkins Brailler. And that was the nirvana of Braille, of course, back in the day. And so once we all got to the Perkins Brailler, we had our favorite ones that we wanted to pull off the shelves in the classroom. Some were better than others and some were not so much that way. And we had activities at school all week, maybe somewhat regimented, I think, but it was more or less to keep us occupied. Like Monday night was swimming, Tuesday night might have been guitar lessons, Wednesday night bowling, I might have those switched, music appreciation Thursday night, and home you were on Friday. And then as we got older and into our teen years and before going to regular high school, you could come in on Sunday nights, especially if you had a girlfriend and wanted to spend some extra time with her. So, that was kind of cool, Sunday night and you had that extra time and you had to go hide outside the school and go necking and wherever you wanted to do it. That was the fun of the teenage years. So then after that came high school. My first 2 years at a school that the Montreal Association for the Blind sent most of their blind students to Montreal West High. And I was challenged with that because my father had money. And of course, because my father had money, they said, well, you can't stay at the MAB. Your father can send you home. Like he had men working for him, picking up construction equipment for the construction shovels, the excavation equipment, the bulldozers and the heavy equipment that they use. So this guy would pick me up at the MAB. I had a study room there where I could listen to talking books on tape, or do my assignments and use the encyclopedia. But I was like there and home like at 7 o'clock, have supper, and you'd have 3 hours maybe to do some things around there, and then back to school the next morning. So that got to be really tough for me. In the meantime, I got involved with a singing group in St. Lambert on the South Shore where I live, called the Here and Now, HEAR and Now. And people familiar with St. Lambert and the 70s might remember the Here and Now. We were about 50 kids from high school, some of them going to CIGO, which is junior college, and some going to McGill University in Concordia. And we used to do ecumenical services all over the province and into Ontario to places like Cornwall and beyond, I suppose, a little ways. So that's where I got to know a lot of the students and a lot of the local people, and the person who ran the Here and Now, Bob Mitchell, who I admired greatly, was a teacher and the director of this choir. And so he said to me one day, why the hell aren't you going to school in your own community? Why are you going to Montreal West High School? And I kind of thought the same thing, but it was the accepted fact that if you went from the MAB, Montreal Association for the Blind, most of you went to Montreal West High. And it was accepted that you would go there, you would do your 4 years, because you went to grade 11 in Quebec. We didn't have 12 and 13 like Ontario and the rest of the provinces in Canada. So, I broke the mold, and I said, you know what, Bob? You're right. So Bob talked to my parents to get their thoughts on the idea, and then talked to people at the school board, the South Shore Regional School Board, and to the principal, Paul Crow, at Chambly County High School. And Paul said, you know what? We'll take him on one condition. We'll give him the extra time to do the Braille and everything like that, but we're going to treat him like any of the other students. Okay. So I'm good with this, right? So I go to do grade 10 and 11 at Chambly County High School, where I was treated like any of the other kids going there. It was a school of about 800 at that time. So I went to high school, did my 10 and 11, participated in after-school activities and like debating clubs and other social activities. I wasn't a sports person, but I was more an academic type person back then. And this is where I got to know people, some of whom had been singing in the Here and Now with me. I sang bass in the Here and Now, but there were a lot of tenors, altos, and sopranos that went to Chambly County High. So I did my 2 years and finished grade 11. And from there, I went to Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, where I had to do a 4-year academic program because I did not go to junior college, which is Quebec's system before going into university. I believe it's 3 years of academic or 2 years and then vocational school, like if you want to be a plumber or something like that. So that was the difference. And I made a lousy plumber. I would have made a lousy plumber or electrician or something like that. So I went to Acadia University and I got bitten by the bug because I got involved in the radio station there called Radio Acadia. We used to broadcast into the residences on carrier current where people would pick up the signal on 700 on the AM on their radio. So anybody in residence could listen to Radio Acadia, or they could listen in the student union building or the dining halls. Now, that's where I got bitten by the radio bullet and failed to take advantage of the academics. I think I got disillusioned by the fact that I was majoring in sociology. And one day I'm sitting in class and this professor says, how do you know that you know what you know? And I'm like, give me a frickin' break. I'm paying $3,600 to go to university and some dude and $2,600 to live in residence. And my father was paying it. That wasn't a problem. But some dude is asking me, how do you know that you know what you know? For all this money? So I didn't take it seriously. And I got involved in the radio station there. And after that, uh, and I partied a lot. One night you were living in residence. One night it was a bunch from PEI. One night was a bunch from Nova Scotia. One night it was a bunch from Quebec. And I had a girlfriend at the time who became my fiance later on, who we'll discuss later on as we move along on this podcast. So that was my time at Acadia, and I ended up only getting 5 credits in the 2 years, and I was supposed to get 10. And the dean of men said to me, you know, this is not really for you. You should think about doing something else with your life. Well, I knew right away because I got bitten by the bullet. I was a disc jockey for a university radio station. So I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I went home and brooded over the summer and wanted to get into the broadcasting course in Halifax, which was run by the Nova Scotia Department of Education. And so I applied, and being outside, not a resident of Nova Scotia, they frowned upon that. And they frowned upon the fact that I was blind, and how the hell is he going to do this job? How the hell does he know one difference between one record? Those are the things with round holes, either in the middle of the 45s or the little ones on the 33 and the third records that we don't hardly use anymore. Never mind the 78s. But so they said to me, okay, we'll give you a shot. And so you start out writing copy for the commercial department, which were really PSAs that we did. And those would be read by announcers onto tape like commercials and put on the air. And then you went and worked the news shifts, working from 6 to midnight, then gradually coming up to being morning newsman. And then you got to the big time where you actually worked on air as a DJ, starting with the all-night show and working up to the morning show, because there was always people coming and going, getting contact training at a radio station in St. John, New Brunswick, or Sydney, Nova Scotia, or Halifax, or Moncton, or wherever in the Maritimes. The equipment I used at that time was a Triformations one-sided Braille printer that sat on the floor and was hooked up to the wire service, which would print out whatever printed material was coming across the news wire. It was called broadcast news in those days. It's now the Canadian Press. And you hear newscasts every hour on many stations from the Canadian Press in Canadian radio. So from there, I was sent out to contact training once I'd done my shtick, and it took me a little more time because they had a hard time convincing station managers to give a blind broadcaster a chance. There was only me and one other guy going to a university program at Ryerson, which was an actual broadcasting school in Toronto. So there was myself and him, and we were the only 2 potential blind broadcasters in Canada at the time. So eventually what happened was a friend of mine from the broadcasting course went to his program director, Bruce Lee, and that was his actual name. He was from Port Morion, Nova Scotia, with a really good radio voice. And he said, Bruce, I'm really tired of doing the all-night show, and I'd like to move up. And I know somebody who I believe to be capable to do the all-night show. So Bruce said, well, get him to send me a tape and I'll listen. And This was an air check tape of stuff I had done at CRXL, the broadcasting school. And Bruce liked it, and he said, okay, we'll give you a chance. So I started there doing the all-night show and doing Sunday mornings, where you played 4 hours of religious tapes and community programming, and then you were on the air from 10 to noon. And I went to Bruce and had my record collection, because I'm into music of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so I had my record collection, and this station had only opened in the mid-70s, I believe, and was on 1410 kilocycles at the time. They're on FM now and in stereo, as are most stations in Nova Scotia now. And they gave me 2 hours to do an oldie show for the last part of my shift. The phones went apeshit, and that's no word of a lie. The phones wouldn't stop, and people would call in and say, have you got this? Have you got that? Have you got this? And I went to my fiance and I said, Maureen, I need help with this, because people are going absolutely apeshit crazy, and they want to hear requests. And have we got them in the music library here, or do we have them at home? And it came to the point where I said, no, we don't have that here, but I do have it in my record collection. So I took notes with my Perkins Braille writer that certain person had called in from this part of the area that we served, Lordways or Arashat or somewhere, or Port Hawkesbury or Antigonish or wherever. And I made note of that. And if I had the record, I brought it in and made sure this is for so-and-so in Antigonish who asked me to play this record. So this is what I did. And I also did summer substituting, where they had students doing my all-night show, and I had the chance to do other stuff. And I also had responsibilities of doing commercials, recording them on tape, and you had like a jingle, and you had maybe 25 seconds in the music bed to read the copy of what the commercial was all about. One thing that happened in that regard was I became an extremely fast Braille reader, because you had to Braille out the copy yourself. The stuff that came off the news wire, where you had to read actual news, weather, marine weather, sports, and all that, was in grade 1 Braille. So you can imagine how fast I would have to read to be able to sound like a regular radio broadcaster. And the reason I think I got into radio was Montreal mentors here, people like Bill Roberts, George Balkan, Dave Boxer, Marc Denis, and so many others. I wanted to be just like them. Well, 2 years down the road from that, I got laid off. In the true tradition of the maritime provinces, very economically deprived and all that sort of thing. And they said, we want you to record tapes for us with a little bit of banter and music that we can play for 6 hours on a special machine, and we'll change the tapes. And I said to the station manager, who was not the program director, I had another interview to go to for a district administrator's position with the CNIB in Fredericton, New Brunswick, because I was looking at other career opportunities, because I wasn't getting the chances I thought I was doing radio, because you got to remember, I was one or two broadcasters, and the station managers would say, well, I got stairs in my place. What if he falls down the stairs? My insurance would cover that, and all this kind of crap. So ended my radio broadcasting career. And I said to Bill Martin, the station manager, and you can delete the name out if you want, I said, you know what you can do with your tapes, Bill? Shove them up your ass, because I'm not replacing myself with myself. So I went for my interview in Fredericton, and that was the end of my radio career. In the meantime, Maureen was working at the Recreation Center in Port Hawkesbury, Nova Scotia, setting up equipment and taking reservations for people who wanted to book the gym or book equipment or whatever. And she got laid off. Well, we had to eat. We both needed work, and she was sighted. and could probably get a job pumping gas, which, by the way, I did do for the Kinsman Club, which is like the Lions or the Rotary Club or those type of service clubs. Bruce Lee, the program director, had gotten me involved in the Kinsman Club. So when I was first in radio there at CIGO, and one of the reporters from the Scotia Sun, here's this blind guy pumping gas for people. Like, how the hell does he do that? You do it by sound. Or they tell you, I only want so much. I said, okay, well, tell me when I get to $5 or $10 and we'll stop the pumps. And of course, Maureen saw this. And later on, once we got out to Alberta and she ended up managing 7-Eleven stores, I would be the one sent out at 30 below to pump our gas for our car. So, I was well trained in that. But getting back to Port Hawkesbury, well, 1980 came and the assassination, unfortunately, of John Lennon. About 2 weeks after that, I flew and Maureen flew from Nova Scotia to Edmonton, Alberta. So my father flew us out to see what we thought, and we were told, and I was told by the CNIB in Halifax, there's this guy named Tim Chuck who is a vocational trainer, and the economy is good in Alberta. He'll help you get a job doing anything. So I went out, and she went out, and I went to the CNIB, talked to Bill, set me up with a telemarketing operation with the Globe and Mail, a newspaper, a national newspaper. That job lasted for 6 weeks. And in the meantime, Maureen had gotten a job as a proofreader for some company, and then got on with 7-Eleven and worked her way up from store clerk to assistant manager to a manager, and eventually had her own store or group of stores, one in Edmonton and two in St. Albert, a bedroom community. And she got a new store in St. Albert, actually. There were two, an older store and a new one. And she got the new one with gas pumps and everything. And that's where she ended up working. So we moved to Alberta officially and drove from Nova Scotia to Alberta. We left December 22nd, stopped at my place here in Montreal where my family was. But they had gone away to Florida, so I got the key from next door from my uncle, and, it was like, have steaks, have anything you want. I think we ordered Chinese food for Christmas Day, because Maureen wasn't about to cook a turkey for me and her in a strange place, just for us. And then the 26th of December, we left for Alberta, drove across northern Ontario, hit black ice outside of Pembroke, which is outside of Ottawa, kept going, and eventually ended up in Alberta. We stopped in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, just on the border, December 31st, because Maureen wanted to be off the roads on New Year's Eve because all the drunks were out there, and she didn't want to have to deal with that. So we stayed in a motel in Lloydminster. The part of the city is in Alberta and part of the city is in Saskatchewan. And we watched Seven Brides for Seven Brothers on TV, and I think we got drunk ourselves for New Year's Eve. So that was kind of fun. And so when I got out to Alberta, and the Globe and Mail job, which lasted for 6 weeks, then I took off a skills course at the Jack Braden Community Institute, because I had to have something on paper to say that I had a course, with the idea of getting employed by the government. So my employment counselor at the time recommended me to one of the office managers for Canada Employment and Immigration, and they just happened to be looking for a switchboard operator who was bilingual. So I fit the bill. And so then I started in February 1982 with Canada Employment and Immigration and its various incarnations of the name changing over the years. Switchboard operator, I became a job order consultant, and took ads from employers and used JAWS to input those ads into the National Jobbank until such time as the website became self-serve, at which point I monitored ads that employers were putting in with JAWS to make sure that they were following the P's and G's of the federal government and the National Jobbank. Like, some employers would try to put ads in and say, like for Hooters, that they had to have certain size breasts or whatever, seriously. And that was against the guidelines. So I would refuse those ads. Well, I got to talk to your manager because this is not acceptable and I have a right. No, you don't. You can ask for certain types of restrictions based on insurance, must be over 25 for driving purposes, but you can't demand stuff like that. So, well, let me speak to your supervisor. What's your name? Well, I said, my name's Marc. I'm only obligated to give you my first name. And they'd get on the phone with my supervisor, and first thing you know, the supervisor would be telling them the same thing. So that's what's my job, which I eventually went to with the Alberta government because the feds sold us off, basically. We were given 6 weeks notice because Alberta wanted the programs and services that the feds had. And so we were the first of the 10 provinces and 3 territories, and New Brunswick was after us. So we were traded off, 11 of us in the job orders area, and 400 in all total across Alberta, me being the only blind one, to the Alberta government, where we were treated like the poor cousins, and I didn't have any equipment taken over from the feds. I don't know it was my boss's lack of insight or if the feds wouldn't let it go. I suspect it was a little bit of both. And I started in 97. We transferred to Alberta in December of 97. And I sat in my office listening to the radio for 4 months in order to get paid until I got my equipment similar to what I had with the feds. And that would have been computer, the latest version of JAWS, open book, Versa Braille in the earlier years with the feds, which became Braille and Speak, Kurzweil Reader, a reading machine, and then open book after that, and Braille and Speak. And this is what I had moving onward with the Alberta government, where I basically did the same job as I had done with the feds. In the meantime, my marriage was going south. Maureen had suffered of 2 bouts of depression and other issues, and she started being not only verbally, but physically abusive and throwing things at me when she lost her temper and so on and so forth. She eventually busted her femur, which ended her up in a wheelchair, and through various things she was let go from 7-Eleven because of her depression and worked for, I think, a year and a half for AAA, which is CAA in Canada. AAA, the American Automobile Association, which was CAA. She was a telephone person, helping clients with booking trips and triptychs and services for AAA, and referring them to the travel services and so on and so forth. And then she was let go because the new supervisor came in and wanted to clean house, basically. And Maureen was the least senior of the bunch and the first one let to go. And she then took a job with a company called Sykes at Home, an American company who happened to have a contract with one of our cellular providers, Rogers Communications in Canada, where she did customer service and business services, depending upon which Hugh needed her. And so she did that, but in the meantime, they weren't giving her enough time to pee, being in a wheelchair, so she'd just pee in the garbage can. And guess who would have to clean out the garbage can and the papers associated with paperwork from printing off things and whatnot? I'd have to go into the little shower, empty the garbage can, and clean out the piss. Not only there, but under the sheets in the bedroom where she'd pee in the bed and all of this stuff. And meanwhile, we had 2 cats and a dog, various cats over the period. So due to her incontinence, I was getting complaints from people at work that my clothes stank, and I stank because of it, even though I took a shower every day. And eventually, somebody came in to see her because of her health from home care and reported it to the owners of the condominium where we were living. This would have been in end of December 2016. And so we got a nice eviction notice in February saying that we would be required to vacate the premises from the condo association. We were renting the only condo that was owned by a person who lived in Montreal, as a matter of fact, but owned this condo in Alberta. And so we were faced with trying to find a place to move. And I called the moving company, and I left Edmonton March 29th, 2016, 2 hours after the movers had come and said to Maureen and I, sorry, we can't move you because of the condition of this place in here. We'd have to come in with hazmat mask and so on and so forth. And so she was, after the movers left, she was sitting at the table bawling her eyes out. What are we going to do? We have an apartment, but how are we going to get there if they're not going to move us? And because of all of this, and I had given up at this point. She had asked me a month before to participate in a suicide pact with her. And she said, I'll put the cats and dogs down humanely, and then we could take your insulin and we could end it for ourselves. So I gave myself 72 hours of contemplation on this one. And after the 72 hours, and this was prior to the movers coming, this would have been in March, I believe, early end of February. I said, I'm sorry, Maureen, I can't join you in that suicide pact because I have things left to do on this planet before I'm done. So the day came, the movers left, and she says, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, well, Maureen, I know what I'm going to do. I'm leaving. I'm going home to Montreal, and I'm starting a new life there. And she said, you leave, you don't come back. I said, don't worry, I won't. So I left. I got in a cab. I went to our bank that we had a shared account in. I'd just gotten my life insurance policy, cashed it in because she wanted my money, as she's been taking my father's money all along. And I took half of it out for me. Went across the road with the bank draft from the bank I was at to a credit union, a local Alberta credit union, to a nationally recognized bank. So I knew I could pull out put the bank draft in when I got to Montreal. So, and I took that. Actually, the account was set up in Edmonton, but I could take money out of it in Montreal because it was a nationally recognized bank. So that was no problem, and there would be no paper trail for Maureen to follow. So I did that, and took out, I believe it was $600 or $800, paid for my one-way airplane ticket to fly from Edmonton to Montreal, March 29th, 2017. I called my brother once I checked in at Edmonton International, and said, Renee, what are you doing tomorrow morning at about 1:45? And he says, why? I said, because I'm flying in to Montreal on a connector from Toronto. And he said, really? You and Maureen? I said, no, I left her. And he says, well, it's about friggin' time. We've been telling you that for years. So I left. I came to Montreal, spent about a month and a half at René's till we found a place in the borough in Montreal where I wanted to live, close by and near friends who had gone to the Montreal Association for the Blind, and close to that institution, which was now the Lethbiridge Layton Mackay Rehab Center, because it had been taken over by the government and other organizations incorporated into it. And I couldn't take the physical abuse anymore that Maureen was pushing out, like the physical abuse of throwing stuff, the incontinence, and the whole 9 yards. So that's why I left. My divorce to her came through in 2021, about 3 weeks after she passed away. She fell out of her wheelchair after her trying to commit suicide in 2017. She had taken some of my insulin that I had left and left a suicide note blaming me for everything that was her problem. The owner of the condo from St. Agathe, Quebec, called my brother Rene and said, what's wrong with Marc and Maureen? What happened? My condo's a mess and this and that. So Rene explained that I had left Maureen and that Maureen had committed suicide or tried to, and that's just how they found her, and that's why they contacted the person who owned. She ended up in the psych ward at the Grey Nuns Hospital in Edmonton and spent 2 or 3 months there before she could prove to her social worker and the powers that be that she could take care of herself. And they eventually found a place for her to live and carry on and go back to working for Sykes at Home and doing her job, which she did until she passed away in 2021. And like I say, 3 weeks later, my divorce decree came through, which was useless because she was dead. You know what I'm saying? So that's basically why I came back to Montreal. I got involved with the friends I had here, who some blind and some new, who I've met. Met my spiritual wife, Sandy, who lives in a building diagonally across the road from me because she's in a chair, wheelchair as well. And my friend Christine actually said to me, did you have to pick another one of those? You know, like, meaning, you know, like you got in enough trouble with Maureen, so there was a lot of prejudgment. And I mean, Sandy was different from Maureen. She was clean. She took care of herself. We took the paratransit wherever we needed to go, and where we didn't take paratransit, we took the regular buses and the metro systems where the metro stations would be accessible. Something like only 24 of the 60 metro stations in Montreal are. So we were both involved in advocacy groups with the Users Committee for Lethbridge Layton Mackay. We're involved in the social activities of the Quebec Federation for the Blind, and we're advocates for other people with other disabilities. So that brings me up to the present day. And I just want to comment on who is Marc Baillargeon and where is he at now? Well, we have a relationship, though spiritual and not a real marriage. It's the old disability of question of where if you live together and one of you is on, some people call it social assistance, some people call it welfare, it depends what province you're in. They look at the person who has the money or the income. And in my case, it's old age security and the money I get from my public service pension from working with Alberta. I would have had a federal pension as well, but when it became unlocked, when I transferred to the province, Maureen insisted that I cash it in, and she spent $10,000 flying to New Brunswick to go to her sister's wedding. And so went my federal pension. In any case, I have my old age. I have my public service pension from Alberta. It's about $2,000 a month, I guess, all told. And that's what I live on, and she's on welfare. We can't live together because as soon as they see what I'm bringing in, they'd cut her off. Her benefits, like her dental, her medical, the money that she gets would be reduced because they'd figure I would have to support her. And that is a thing that's a problem not only for people in the States who are, I believe, on what they call SSI, if my information is correct, but in Canada, all across the country, for people who are disabilities of any sort. So that's where we're at. And me and her, we just do what we do. We're advocates for people with disabilities. We're out there helping people. She's always trying to help the homeless, and if she sees somebody in need, she'll buy them a coffee or a burger or something, and she's involved in our borough here, which is called Notre Dame de Grace, abbreviated NDG. She's involved with the community council here and volunteers with them and volunteers wherever she can. So, and as for me, pretty much the same thing. I try to be out there and active with people, trying to get to know people and help them. Now, I have 45% hearing loss in one ear and 75% in the other ear. So that is an issue, crossing streets and whatnot, which is why I've taken the decision to apply to guide dog schools as a first timer at 69 years old. I'm thinking of, first of all, seeing eye, and then seeing eye, and then guiding eyes, and then Mira, which is our local guide dog school in Quebec, then GDB, and CNIB, and I've also called Guide Dogs of Canada in Oakville, and that's in Ontario, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. I made 2 phone calls with no success, although they're supposed to be taking on clients as of July 2nd. I haven't seen any evidence of that. Now, being a first-timer, for guide dogs, you have to go through an assessment. You have to have your eyes assessed through Lethbiridge, Layton Mackay, and your O&M skills, or maybe it's done by the schools in some instances. So the basic applications are in. The vision and audio reports and the O&M reports have to come from Lethbiridge, Layton Mackay, and the medical reports from my doctor. So that's where all this stands at this point. I've received information from Guiding Eyes that my application has been activated and is open, but I will be informed as to what comes next, and that's the only school I've heard from as of yet. So, but I think it would improve my ability to get around and to give me more confidence to get around, although I do walk over to Sandy's. I've walked from here to Lethbridge, Layton Mackay on my own. It's about 7 blocks. I go with friends too. We go out to breakfast and stuff like that. And I just say to my friends who I'm walking with, friend or friends, when I get to the corner, I'll tell you when I think it's ready to go. And if it's not an audible light signal, you tell me if I'm right or not, because of the hearing issue. And that works, but I'm just not as confident as I once was. I learned how to use a cane in 1968 with our first orientation and mobility instructor, Bill Rudkin, who taught me then and gave me the confidence that I had through most of my years to travel independently. I used to take the regular buses in Edmonton and in Montreal too, for times, and travel anywhere and everywhere until I met Maureen. And then a lot of times we drove places like most couples do. You drive out and go to Tim Hortons, or you drive out and go for steak dinner or whatever. Sometimes we drive when we were in Nova Scotia from Port Hawkesbury to Antigonish, which is like 30 miles west. We'd get to Antigonish and say, there's nothing here. Let's go to New Glasgow, which was a bigger place, half an hour more. And we get to New Glasgow and say, oh, screw this. We'll drive to Halifax, which was another hour and a half. So we'd go to some of our favorite stomping grounds in Halifax from the days when I was in the broadcasting course. She liked to shop, and I like to, check out the restaurants and some of the stores and buy CDs and electronics and all that sort of thing, because you got more in the big city of Halifax than you did in the little town of Port Hawkesbury of 4,000 people. Or sometimes we'd go the other way to Sydney, Nova Scotia, which was 3 hours away, and do what we needed to do, turn around and come back, and I'd sleep in the car, and then I'd go in and do the all-night show. Good memories from our marriage. It wasn't all bad, but it gradually slid and went downhill, and that was it. But I think I've had a very good, rewarding life. The best thing I ever did was to leave Alberta and come back to Montreal and get involved here with activities like Enable Montreal, which was one of the first things I did, which was a project at Concordia to make Montreal an accessible city. And we all worked on various ideas and programs and put proposals together after 2 months. Like Sandy's was how to make Concordia University more prepared for emergency situations for disabled people, not just blind, but people hard of hearing, people in chairs, et cetera, et cetera. And mine was how to make a metro station more accessible for people with disabilities. And there were several other projects involved, probably about a dozen or so. And that's where I met Sandy in 2018. And then we moved on from there. But I'm very thankful to have had the opportunities I had in radio. As Judge Judy would say, 15 minutes of fame. But I loved it. It was my best job. I loved meeting the people. I loved doing the commercials, the partying, everything that went into being a broadcaster. And then from that, well, the government years paid the bills, federal or provincial. I didn't mind working for the feds, but Alberta, we were treated poorly, and I didn't like it as much. And then I retired and came back here where, at 69 years old, I have to say I've done pretty good. I have people like Sandy in my life and my other friends, and people like Kayla, who are absolutely amazing. She's a wonderful friend. I have no inhibition about speaking French with her because she doesn't judge my quality of French, which is not the best. And we help each other out, and we speak on the fly. And the friendships are the things that are most important in life. And she is, of course, right up there, and a wonderful person to have as a friend. And I've only known her for about 4 months. We met on Jacket FM and then moved to Rail and then WhatsApp, and now we do FaceTime back and forth. So that's absolutely wonderful. And friends are the most important thing that you can have. So I've had a pretty wonderful life, I would say. And I figure I'm 69 years old now. I've got 20 more years to go. And it's hard to say what I will be able to accomplish myself or with others in those next 20 years. That's it.
That's great. Absolutely. What really stood out to me in your story this evening was your enormous resilience. You are a very resilient You're a very happy and you're a very kind person. I'm glad my microphone was muted. Do you mind, by the way, and I don't mean to offend you either way, do you mind if I say something graphic, use a bit of graphic language, by the way?
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Oh, okay, good. Because I'm glad my microphone was muted, because when you said the part about how your ex, Maureen said that you should commit suicide with her, all I said was, fuck me. Fuck that. Get the fuck out of that.
Yeah.
That's a life lesson right there that people need to learn. When your partner tells you to end your life, that's definitely a clue that you need to get as far the fuck away from that person as you can possibly do.
Amen.
That's on the other hand, there was obviously some serious mental and cognitive issues with her, which I feel compassion and sorry for, that she was suffering as much as she was. She was obviously very unhealthy and a very unhealthy person, and that's very sad. That's incredibly saddening. But you made the right choice.
Oh, absolutely.
I did. If they start telling you to kill yourself, that's when you just need to, you don't even need to divorce them. You just need to run.
Wow.
And
that's what I did, especially with the incognitants and the movers and all that. That's what I had to do.
No, especially when she said you should end your life. Because all those other things you could live with, but when they tell you to end your life, no, you need to run. Never mind the divorce papers, just run. The other thing that stands out to me is that you're a very happy person. You're just a very happy, pleasant guy, and I think that really says a lot about you. You believe in being happy and helping people, and I think that's so good. Yeah, you're right. You grew up and you were working in radio right in the heyday, right in the height of the radio industry. It's interesting because here in the United States.
And that was a privilege and an honor that they gave me the chance in Halifax through that broadcasting course, through the Nova Scotia Department of Education. Sure. I was a Quebecer, and I had to move and live and have a physical residence in Nova Scotia before they'd even consider me.
Right. Well, that's still really spectacular. That's really special that you were able to do that. Because in the United States, there was a height of radio broadcasters. The golden age was the 50s to the 90s. Do you know Lou Kolb?
No.
Oh. If you have me on Facebook, I'll introduce you. He's around your age. He might be a little older. He did exactly what you did, but he worked in American radio, and he had a lot of the same experiences. He's an expert ham radio operator, and he also helps a lot of people around the world, just like you. You would love geeking out about his knowledge too. He'll tell you everything about that. In the old times, they when the radio stations in America didn't have anything to play, they figured out that if they turned their antennas and their dials just right, they could actually play Canadian radio. Basically, they would bounce off the ionosphere and transmit Canadian radio into the United States. And for old people, this was very exciting. And then over time, they started to be able to play, other countries' radios. But it was, for the time period, it was very exciting because you were speaking.
It was. I used to DX. I used to listen to Larry Glick from WBZ in Boston. Oh, yeah. And I'd go sleep at school in the mornings in the 70s when I was in high school because I was an avid Glicknik. And I used to DX. Sunday nights, radio stations used to go off the air.
Yeah, exactly.
And I used to DX and try to pick up those stations locally that went off the air. Right. And the stations in Mexico or Cuba or somewhere exotic. Transworld Radio from Bonaire on 800, where CJAD was on 800, and they were on the air most of the time, except for Sunday nights when they did maintenance. And they used to do Tuesday night maintenance on the FM transmitters up on Mount Royal. So you'd try to get Plattsburgh, New York, Burlington, Vermont, all those stations. And when you had E-Skip on FM in the summertime, you'd get stations from Iowa and Missouri, where Kayla is. And this is on frickin' FM,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just absolutely amazing. I am on Facebook. It's Marc Bayargent Malloy, because I took on Sandy's last name. So I
couldn't find you. Later, you know what? Later on tomorrow, I'll send you my link on Facebook, and you can add me. Okay. I looked through Kayla's friends, and I couldn't find you, so her friends are not visible apparently. But that's always a problem, tracking people down. But once you add me, I'll be able to connect you with Luke Kolb, and
Absolutely.
you'll
Absolutely.
love talking to him.
I
You know all
sure
what you do.
would. Yeah, lots of
And
memories of radio and DXing and all those kinds of things. I loved it. I loved the industry, and I still do it, but it's a fraction. It's a very sad case when you have
mhm.
all these companies, even in Canada. You have Rogers and you have Bell and you have, there's another company, Chorus, which are the main three. Same as you have Clear Channel and the other
Mhm.
ones I can't think of in the States. It's pathetic. It really is. It's what the
Well,
radio
the
industry
funny
has
thing,
become.
the funny thing that I've noticed is a couple of things. I agree with you that terrestrial radio and amateur radio and shortwave and those things have really gone downhill over the years. My father is a ham, and so am I. We don't do the hobby at the moment, but we have our QSL cards. My
Right.
father has a full, album of them from, Radio Moskva, Radio Moscow, and all Yugoslavia and all sorts of ancient countries that are no longer existing
No
now.
longer. Yeah,
But it's all very, very fascinating. And you're very right on one hand. On the other, I've noticed though that internet radio has really picked up. People have really become interested in radio online. So it's
absolutely.
it's it's a
Yeah.
similar thing. It's not quite as magical, and it's only not as magical because it's no big deal. When you join my WhatsApp group, you can talk to somebody in South Africa just by typing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's not exciting anymore,
No,
because
it's not.
of technology. Well, but what I will say for the younger listener is 50 years ago, if you said, "Oh, I got a message from England today," that would have been like a sci-fi thriller. That would have been
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
like a magical experience. And it must have been bizarre when when the American military started sending signals from, of course, as you know, Montauk Air Force Base, when they
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
sending signals over to England and a British voice picked up on the other end. I don't know how scared they must have been, but that must have freaked them out the first time, because if you had never spoken to another country and you never knew that you could do that, send your voice across the ocean, that must have been really freaky. That must have been like, whoa, what did we
Well,
just do? Yeah.
I've talked to blind and sighted hams
Oh yeah.
about their first experience
Hmm.
getting that first contact.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely a wonderful experience. And it still is, except you have so much hash now on shortwave and the noise background with all the electronic equipment out there.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to do what you used to be able to do in the 60s and 70s. I mean, I have a shortwave radio, and it's pathetic now when you turn the bands and you can hardly get
Hmm.
any stations anymore. I used to listen to Moscow Mailbag, Radio Netherlands,
Oh,
uh,
my father too. My father too.
DX
Exactly.
Jukebox, all those shows, Joe Bedenoff, we used to do Moscow Mailbag, and he was at Expo 67 to cover it for Radio Moscow.
Hmm.
And,
Absolutely.
it's just amazing. And there's none of that anymore.
There's none of it now. There's less of it now, but also too, when you're still able to make a contact over amateur radio, it makes it all the more exciting now, because you didn't use
Yeah,
the internet, you used technology and the atmosphere. So it's
yeah.
almost just as magical. It's just different. And yeah, with all of the one moment. With all of the electronic devices, interference, RF and things like that. Yes, you're very right.
Hmm.
I mean, I'll show you interference, man. You come down here to Florida, you won't be able to. If you think you have interference issues in Canada, come down to the stateside. We have all sorts of, difficulties with that.
I'd move to Florida in a minute. I want to get back to Hollywood Beach where we used to go when
Yeah.
we were kids, and my father had a place in West Hollywood. Him and my uncle, they had a construction company, of
Oh,
course, and they
that's
bought a
right.
house in Miramar,
Hmm.
West Hollywood. I'd love to go back there. That's one of the things on my bucket list that I want to
Yeah.
do. You know, Kayla
Sure.
and I are talking about maybe meeting up next year at AFB convention in St. Louis, because that's not far away from
Hmm.
where she is.
Right.
Like
Right.
that would be really cool. And then she put me in contact with a lot of people that she knows.
Yeah.
I mean, you do that anyway on Clubhouse, on WhatsApp, and whatever.
Clubhouse really had its hype, but now Clubhouse is really backing off now. I'm noticing Clubhouse had a moment but now it's like fewer people are on Clubhouse. I've noticed
Because
that.
they derailed all the blind people when they came out with 2.0. It wasn't accessible. They're building it back now, but no
Oh,
blind
okay.
people want to use it.
I see. I see.
They
Because
jumped off the train.
right when it came out, all the blind people were talking about it. I got on there,
Uh-huh.
I always felt, hey, this is fun, but I don't really, just my honest opinion. I didn't really have a voice. I didn't really have a place there. Doesn't mean it's bad. I just couldn't fit in with that community, of Clubhouse, I kind of feel the
First
same about
time,
Discord, Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, I don't like Discord. I really never have. But the first Clubhouse experience I had was I went on and my friend Earl Zwicker from Toronto had talked me into it. Oh, they're just making it voiceover accessible. I went into a room and then was this guy talking about the Holocaust
Oh
who had
boy.
lived through, who was living in Auschwitz or Dachau. I can't remember which one.
Oh
And
boy.
the life, the day-to-day experiences and what went on and how he's giving back now to students and going to speak at schools and educate kids about the Holocaust and what it was really
Hmm.
like. And he has his mementos and stuff. And Dr. Fauci, was Anthony Fauci, who
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
doctor for
Uh-huh.
various
Exactly.
presidents, he was another one that sticks out for me on Clubhouse. And to
Oh,
be able
really?
to actually talk to these people was really, I mean, I was Larry King on steroids. You know what I mean? It was just
Okay.
wonderful to have that experience.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Absolutely. No, I never knew that all these people were on Clubhouse. I just never paid attention to it, only because I, just got into my podcasting lane and just stuck with it, But that's great that you enjoyed it.
It
I
was,
think certain apps have their advantages and disadvantages. Certain apps lasted. That one that you mentioned earlier today, Jacket FM. Yeah, that one didn't
yeah,
last,
yeah,
right? That one's off the market now, right?
yeah, it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't last
Look at
long.
Roger. Look at Roger. The same thing happened with Roger in 2015. The blind people embraced it. It was actually, you could search for groups on Roger of interest that you could join. And the blind people embraced it for a year. And it was only an experiment by the developers to
Right.
create something else called FICA for businesses. And you know what? They fell flat on their arse with it. They
Hmm.
deserved to do because they would not sell the servers for Rogers to blind people who wanted to run it and make it go. They
Yeah.
said, no, we're not interested. Screw you.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And that's the demise of Roger.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Exactly. That's what happens. You have to know why you're creating these apps. But I agree with you, man, and I give you another 30 years. You'll make it to 100, man,
Yeah, I got a lot
because
of people out there whose lives I want to make miserable yet, so I'm not done.
that's good.
I'm
That's a good
kidding, but
attitude
you
to
know
have.
what I mean.
There's a lot of people you need to help, and there's a lot of people that that deserve your, as we say, your karma. If they
Yeah,
hurt you
I
in the
hope
past,
so.
but overall, what you want to do when you end your life is you want to try to come to the end where you're helping people. It would be nice to end a life on a good foot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I intend to do. But it's people like
Yeah.
Sandy, my spiritual wife, because we're not legally married, and people like Kayla who push me, encourage me, and who make me go forward. And it's Kayla who said, "You got to do this podcast. You got to talk to Aaron and talk about you and talk about what you've done, because people need to hear that, you know." And that's how why she contacted you on my behalf.
And I really appreciate it because she's right. You're someone who's had a really hard life, but what stands out is that you're just graceful. You're just graceful about it. You kind of accept that there's going to be bad people, and you also accept and embrace the good. And there's a lot for me to learn about that. I have a hard life. At least I think I do. I'm 34 years old. I have health problems like we all do. But like you, I stay active in my Lions Club too, and I get out in my community, walk the dog, run the podcast, run my teaching company, run my teaching business that I have for myself, and
Right.
I get up every day, I get up off my ass and I do something. And it really does offend me when I hear stories about sighted people or blind people saying, "Oh, woe is me." I'm
Yeah.
kind of used up with that. I'm used up with that woe is me attitude. I truly am. I truly, truly am used up with that type of
I
thing.
am too. I am too. Like,
You just got to get off your ass and do something good in the world,
exactly.
and that's what you've done. It's interesting
Yeah.
how you love Florida so much because Florida is awfully hot in the summer. It's a little hard here in the summer. It really is.
Well, you know what? You find the nearest beach and the nearest what you would call Bloody Mary, we call Caesars in Canada because they're
Oh
made
yeah.
with clamato juice and instead of tomato juice.
Hmm.
Same bloody thing. So you have a Caesar, you're there on the beach on one of those chairs or things you lie on. Gets too hot, go in the ocean, jump
Well,
the
there you
waves.
go.
And that's something Sandy can't do
Yeah,
because
that's
of her
hard.
motorized chair. And like if she goes on a plane, she's afraid to do it. If you've read articles about what airlines have done to motorized wheelchairs
Oh
and
yeah.
crap them, she would have to pay for that and set herself and then be reimbursed by Quebec healthcare after the fact. So, that's a situation that we're dealing with. That's something. So
Hmm.
if I want to do stuff on my own, I have to do it without Sandy because there's so much
Yeah,
that
it's tough.
she does not have access to.
Hmm. That's tough. No, I went to Canada, as I told you. I forget what I told you. I think I told you I went to Canada with my mother and father a couple months back in May. And
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved Montreal. I absolutely loved it. It was obviously very cold, but it's always cold. But it's still always
Not
beautiful.
cold now. It's 90 friggin' degrees outside. So,
That's
you know,
interesting. When we were there in May and it was quite rainy the whole time, but it was kind
yeah.
of nice. It was kind of relaxing and kind of nice. I was
It's a wonderful city because it's very cosmopolitan. And
extremely.
if Kayla ever comes here with her French, she would fit in like in 30 seconds. Okay?
Absolutely. Well, Kayla will fit in anywhere because she's just a nice lady. She's just a
Yeah.
very dynamic. She's a huge character. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
she's a persona for sure. Yeah. No, I was
Absolutely.
shocked when we were in Canada, man. Those restaurants in Montreal, you can find a great restaurant every night of the week. I was
Yeah.
shocked at the goodness of how much great food they have. It's ridiculous for such a relatively small place. They got a
Yeah.
ton of
Yeah.
businesses and a ton of food choices. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Oh, over 3 million people, like it's, with
Yes,
the
but even
surrounding municipality.
right, but
But
even
I get
still, I
what you
wasn't.
mean.
Yeah, even still, I wasn't expecting all that great food. I wasn't expecting it. So, but I was pleased by it, of course. And then I went to the what's it called, the zoo thing, the dome thing, the
Yeah.
eco
Yeah.
that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know. I
I
haven't been,
loved
but
I loved that because I love my
yeah.
parrots and I can see with my usable vision, I can go right up to the glass and, look at the penguins up close and they're so cute and they're so magical. And that's a great, I love that place. That zoo thing, that's amazing. That's the closest thing to a zoo they have.
And
And
if
that's
you've got
really fun.
you haven't been to Granby Zoo, which is about 40 miles away. That's a huge zoo in, out in the eastern townships. And
Right.
that's, if you ever come back, you got to go to Granby
Sure.
Zoo. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to see in Montreal. And I'm a Montreal food snob. I'll be the first one to admit it. I lived in Edmonton. I've been in Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Spokane and Dallas and all over the country and all over North America with Maureen. We used to drive places or fly.
Yeah.
We didn't have a problem, not
It
like for
sounds
me.
like, intellectually, it sounds like Maureen was actually a nice lady at first, but over time, it sounds like things kind of disintegrated with her,
Yeah,
as her
yeah.
physical health went, her
I'm,
spiritual and emotional being crumbled, is what it sounds like.
that's what
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, that's what
There's a lot to
happened.
learn. There's a lot for us young kids to learn about that. Pick your, either, and you're not going to take this personally,
No,
either pick your wife carefully or, or don't get married in the first place if you don't want to deal with stuff.
exactly,
Because once
exactly.
because people, these young kids, I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm saying it. These young kids don't understand. When you tie that knot, forever means forever. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean,
yeah.
people don't get that now. Forever really means, believe it or not, forever until death do you part.
But by the same token, though, and I'm going to be devil's advocate here on this one,
Sure, sure.
if your life is not necessarily in jeopardy, but if you are miserable in your space with
Yeah,
the person who doesn't recognize you or your talents or what abilities you have and what your needs are, then you've got to get out of that marriage for your own health
for
and
sure. For sure, man.
and sanity and everything else to
Hmm.
move your life forward. I've seen so many people like that too, who stay in a marriage
Oh
for the
yeah.
kids, or who stay in a marriage because they're comfortable and they're afraid to break out. And I mean, and one thing Kayla has taught me about that is if I was to ever move on from Sandy, or something happens to her because she does have health issues, uh, blindness is not a factor for
Mm-hmm.
me anymore. At
Mm-hmm.
one time, I would say, I want a sighted person like Maureen because we could go places, we could drive places. Well, you know what? If you're blind, you can still make it happen. You may not be able to do all the things, but blindness has very little to do with it.
You're very right. You're 100% right. Yeah. In your case, you didn't have a choice. Sadly, as disturbing as it was, Maureen didn't give you a choice in the end. You didn't have a choice. You needed to leave. You needed to flee. So in other
Yeah,
cases,
yeah.
people have more of a choice. In your case, you truly didn't have a choice. Anyway,
No.
anyway, that was, but what you've done since is you're just a happy person. You've just decided to take the high road, and that's something that I need to learn from and keep doing in my own ways and in my own life. And that's so good. And, yeah, you're a very happy, pleasant, fun guy to have around the community. And we're so glad to have you, mate. We truly are. I'm
Oh,
sure you, I'm
thank
sure
you.
you have a lot of questions, for this Aaron Richmond guy, Aaron Richmond, Aaron's opinion, so
Well, I know.
really get under my
Why
skin.
is
What do
it
you want
called
to ask?
Aaron's opinion? And you're actually getting opinions and experiences of others. Why did you go with that?
Well, during the pandemic, I, excuse me, during the pandemic, I was taking care of my elderly guide dog who had since retired. By the way, for the record, I love Guiding Eyes for the Blind. I had a guide dog from them for 13 years. She was lovely. Her name was Nani. She passed in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Anyway, I was, from day one of my own life, Mark, I was immersed in audio, right? From day one, my parents were driving back and forth to hospital and they put on the radio, you know.
Yeah,
So from day one of my life, I knew what talk radio was and I
yeah,
knew what it was, you know, before I could say the jingle WMAL,
yeah.
Washington, that Washington's WMAL station, they were putting it on,
All right.
so, and then what happened is I have always loved to talk. If you haven't noticed, I can't shut up and I won't shut up. And I, finished my university, which was very traumatic for me, as everything is. And then after that, I started teaching English as a second language, as you know, back in 2015, and I still do that now. And I
Yeah.
still am a French speaker. But in 2020, I noticed that a lot of the podcasts were not really receptive and reflective to my opinion, and they weren't really willing to let me talk, and that really bothered me. So I created Aaron's Opinion. It was first known as something else, and then over time it developed into the title Aaron's Opinion because, in my opinion, I want to hear your opinion. So
Okay.
it's about the fact that I want to give you the privilege of transmitting your knowledge so that others can learn from both of us, and that's
Well,
why
I hope
this is
I've done
important.
that. I hope
You
I will
absolutely
give
have.
somebody some inspiration. And
Hmm.
anybody who wants to reach out to me, it's Marc Baillargeon, if you can spell it, MarcBaillargeon 056 at gmail.com. And I can be found on Facebook as Marc Baillargeon Malloy with a dash between the Baillargeon and the Molloy.
Hmm.
And if it's a legitimate contact or we have legitimate friends or, more than one or two, I will, look at that because you have to be so careful with friend requests and
Oh yeah.
there's so much phishing out there. But people who want to reach out by email or by Facebook, I'm not a big messenger fan. I
Nor am I.
do WhatsApp.
Me
I
too.
love WhatsApp, but then you have to have the person's contact information. And that's the trouble. There's not too many social media apps out there where you can actually look for people or look for subjects and then join that conversation. Clubhouse is one place, but it's very hard to find those.
You're very right. Mark, do you have any final questions that you really want to ask me? You asked a great one about the title of Aaron's Opinion, but any other questions that you need to know about me and the podcast?
Well, where are you going from here? What are you going
Hmm.
to interview more like interesting people? Is it restricted to Canada, the U.S., or
Certainly not.
I can give you some ideas about that when
Certainly.
when we have discussions. on
Absolutely. So
that.
any contacts that you have around the universe, whether they're
Yeah.
Canadians, Americans, no matter where they're from, no matter what country they're from, I don't restrict countries. I mean, I interviewed somebody from Nigeria. I've interviewed people from South Africa, England, France, Australia, you name it. I don't stop interviewing people. Never, never, never do I stop. So I
And the
have
thing is,
people,
it's nice
yeah,
for us because we can reach out and talk to these people as well. If they give us their contact information,
exactly.
Marshall McLuhan said back in the 60s, the media is a global universe. And back at the time, there was no satellites and anything like that, but he saw what was coming. And here's where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. You know what? You are so right. You are so right. And this is how much things have changed now. And now we have this whole universe, and it's really, really, really spectacular for sure. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So I don't stop interviewing. I keep reaching out to people. I got people lined up. So definitely don't hesitate. What you need to do is give me I want too many people from you who I need to interview, because not all people come to the show. So you can never give too much help. And I'm sure
Nope.
that you will love contacting some of the people I know. And I'm sure that as time progresses and as you think of people, hey, Aaron needs to interview this guy or this lady, you'll definitely think of it and definitely send them my way for sure. All
I
right.
will send them your way. Absolutely.
All right.
It's been a pleasure and an honor to do this, but
It
I
absolutely
can't go
has.
back so much and thank Kayla for suggesting that I do this.
You're very right. I will certainly thank Kayla too, but I'll thank Marc. Marc, you did a great job.
Thank you, sir.
And we really appreciate having you on the show, and you truly did a great job, and we'll catch up in a bit. Absolutely. All right. Until next time, everybody, Marc, you did a great job. And until next time, be well, everybody. And of course, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.